Greetings, brothers and sisters. Welcome to the weekly Mormon News Roundup. I'm your humble host, Steve A's. That's talent unknown from Kolob. It's April 21st. It's 2024. Thanks for ruminating with me on the great and spacious beehive. There's class action lawsuits against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We're going to see what's going on there. There's also the positives and negatives of LDS Church growth. There's an article in the Salt Lake Tribune from Jana Riess that we're going to take a look at. And finally, Alyssa Grunfeld has gone viral with her so-called Mormon face diagnosis. Stay tuned with us through the entire end of the episode. I'd like to welcome on my program my fabulous co-host, Landon Brophy. Landon, how you doing?
Doing great. How are you doing, Dives?
Hey, I'm doing absolutely fantastic. You're the Mormonish podcasting legend. You also run the Good Book Club. I'm glad to have you on board, and we're going to jump right into what we've got going on this week, which is this tithing lawsuit from 4 states against the LDS Church, and it gets transferred. And Landon, what's happening?
Well, unbelievably, it got transferred to Utah. So it's a lawsuit that was filed in multiple other states. And judges in Washington, D.C. decided that church went and said these are copycats of each other. And so they decided that it could all be decided a block away from the Mormon church headquarters, evidently.
It says cases seeking class action status are now in the hands of a federal judge in Utah, home to the Faith's world headquarters. And I think it's pretty safe to say here that the people who filed these lawsuits, Landon, they're probably not exactly fist bumping it for this transfer back to the Beehive State.
Yeah, I would say so. Have we learned nothing from Mountain Meadows Massacre? Remember that trial where 130 people were murdered and only one was found guilty, a trial held in Utah where nobody would hold anybody accountable because of the church connection. And I think that most people who filed this intentionally made sure they filed outside of Utah so they'd have a fair shot in a case like this. Now you're going to have probably at least half the court, either the judges or if there is a jury, judges, jury, lawyers, half the people involved here are going to have taken an oath to the church that they took in the temple. And that doesn't seem like a very fair trial to me.
It's going to be harder to find an impartial jury in Utah than in New York in the Donald Trump fraud case. This could be a tricky one for sure. Read one little section of this here, and it's the series of fraud lawsuits filed in multiple states have now been moved to a single jurisdiction in the Faith's home state. In the name of justice and legal efficiency, an esoteric panel of federal judges based in Washington, D.C. has ordered 4 would-be class action complaints against the church filed by former or dissatisfied Latter-day Saints in Illinois, Washington, and Tennessee, and California transferred to the Salt Lake Court of the U.S. District Judge Robert Shelby. So I know that you're very familiar with, for instance, the Gene Judson lawsuit, and we've seen another of so-called copycat lawsuits. The church has been sued at least 6 times, maybe a few more times other than that. But yeah, you're familiar with Gene Judson and Latter Daily Digest.
Yeah, in fact, I think a lot of people here in Utah wanted to be a part of that case, but they weren't allowed to because of the fact that they were not citizens of the state of California. So it seems kind of odd that the case can be settled here in Utah, but people in Utah can't join the lawsuit.
It is very interesting. You know, you had Lars Nielsen on the Mormonish podcast a short time ago, and I was actually talking to him about some of these ramifications. And the thing about it is that there is a statute of limitations issues on some of these tithing lawsuits because, you know, you can only sue for fraud and get your money back in a certain period of time. And since the James Huntsman lawsuit is really centered around the City Creek Mall, what was that, 2003, around that time frame? Yeah. The $1.4 billion when President Hinckley said not one penny of tithing would be used for it. And now the Ninth Circuit court has said that a reasonable juror could conclude that President Hinckley's statements were misleading. The problem is that's 20 years ago. We're not really talking about, from my readings, recent court cases about tithing. We're talking about more ancient stuff. So the statute of limitations in California to get your money back is very generous. However, in some of these other jurisdictions, I don't know the answer in Utah, but some of these other places, it might not be so generous. So there's a lot of ins and outs here. Any last thoughts on this James Huntsman copycat lawsuits and the class actions coming forward and getting consolidated in Salt Lake City?
Well, I'm not sure if it's from when the fraud actually happened or when the fraud was discovered. And then you have the issue of when was the fraud actually discovered? Was it when we found out about the SEC and that they were hiding money and they were taking it out of this reserve account? Or was the fraud discovered earlier than that? So it'll be interesting to see how they decide and how they rule and what state's laws do you use in this case to determine that.
I don't have all the ins and outs, and this is actually just a mostly perfunctory article because it just barely happened. So I'm sure we're going to learn more about it. We're going to be watching it here at the Mormon News Roundup, and I'm sure that we will learn more about these things on Mormonish podcast as well. If you can give us a thumbs up, if you can like and subscribe, hit those notification bells, we'd be very grateful for that. Now, next article here is the changes in the temple recommend questions, Landon. This is very interesting here. The LDS leaders have altered temple recommend questions to make it clear no room for personal interpretations on garments. The new statement tells members that they are to be worn day and night throughout your life. Until now, the instructions were to say that you were supposed to wear them as instructed in the temple. The new question is, do you keep the covenants that you made in the temple? We actually learned something very interesting about the veil that we are seeing in this particular picture. The church has now told us what the veil actually stands for.
Well, I've always known that the marks on the garments also match the marks on the veils. They say that the veils mark those covenants that you made, that it's a kind of a reflection of the temple is the way I've always understood it.
And in the statement, it says the new statement to be read, every recommend seeker says the sacred underclothing reminds us that the veil in the temple is symbolic of Jesus Christ. And that's the first time I'd ever heard that particular claim to be made. And they also included a letter that went along with this from the First Presidency to be read over the pulpit here. And I'll just read it in part, sent out on April 12, 2024. The garment of the Holy Priesthood is a sacred symbol of Jesus Christ and is a reminder of our covenant relationship with him and Heavenly Father. As endowed members keep the covenants they have made, including the sacred privilege to wear the garment, they will have greater access to the Savior's mercy, power, strength. So what do you get from that, Landon, as far as the sacred privilege to wear the garment? That's the first time I've really heard that language as well.
Yeah, I think we're going to see what that means here. A little bit later, we have some data on people and how they wear their garments and what percentage of the people actually see this as a privilege to wear the garment. And I think you're going to see not as many people think it's a privilege as the First Presidency thinks. I've also noticed this calling it the garment of the Holy Priesthood. That's a completely new term. I've never heard it referred to that way. And ever since the talk in General Conference, it seems to be that's the only way that they even mention garments now is in that. I think it's kind of funny that the new temple recommend questions that when you go in, they might as well just make it, what are you wearing? A kind of a creepy question for a bishop to ask, across the desk.
We discussed that in great detail in our last episode of the Mormon News Roundup, where I had Mackenzie on, who runs a very popular TikTok and YouTube channel. We definitely dissected that. And we also got the attention of Ward Radio, who did a response to our response. So we're starting to see this stuff really circulate out there. It says that it's a privilege to wear the garment. It kind of reminds me like a driver's license. It's not a right, it's a privilege. And it also says that you have better access to God's love and mercy and strength. And that, for me, really doubles down on what we heard from President Eyring in the last General Conference, saying that people who keep their covenants have greater access to God's love. And that, for me, tracks with President Nelson's conditional feelings about God's love. If you wear garments, if you follow the teachings of the prophets, if you keep your covenants, God loves you even more than other people. It's not that God loves everyone the same. Literally in this statement, what I get from it is, if you wear your garments and follow the brethren, you will have greater access to the Savior's love and mercy. So it's a very conditional, transactional feel.
Deciding your love for someone based on the underwear they wear is probably the way that Jesus taught.
Not too sure about this. Jana Riess did talk about this. And what did she say in this particular article here?
And they found that really young people really don't care much whether or not they wear the garment. And by young people, we're talking people my age and younger. It's really just the boomers that are wearing their garments. And I think we have an actual graph that shows this, but it's a larger percentage. So they took a survey, and in the survey, they asked, when was the last time that you wore them? And these are people who have been endowed. These are people who should be wearing their garments all the time based on what the prophet has said and what the church leaders have said in the most recent conference. Am I currently wearing them? Did I wear them yesterday, but not today? Have I worn them within the last week, within the last month, within the last 6 months, but not the last month, between 6 months and a year ago, between 1 and 5 years ago, and more than 5 years ago? And the results are pretty interesting that we see. Only 54% of the people that took part in the survey, these are people who are endowed, were wearing their garments at the time that they were answering the questions. on this. The rest is spread out over 10% or less on each of the other questions. That's pretty striking that only 54% of endowed members were actually wearing their garments at the time the question was asked.
It seems like anecdotally, I don't know what the numbers were back in the heyday of Mormonism, which was in the late 90s, but it seemed like the percentage, at least from my perspective, I don't have any raw data, the anecdotal information that I'm aware of, it would have been in the 80% range. It certainly would have been higher. We've seen a vast erosion of people wearing garments, and perhaps that is why we are seeing letters that are coming out from the First Presidency. Perhaps that's why we're also seeing general conference talks from Sister Janet Dennis, who hammered home the message and also was reinforced by President Oaks in the last General Conference that wearing garments is extremely important to church membership. It's amazing. The older members of the church, they are not as fervent as I recall. The millennial generation and the young folks today, they are not as interested in towing the line in this particular aspect. I think it's going to be an increasingly uphill battle, especially for women, because the fashions of today are just so much out of touch with what the garments were. If you look at the history of the garments, they used to be one piece. They used to go all the way to the ankle. They used to go all the way, one piece all the way out to the wrists. We've seen the garment evolve many times over the centuries and over the decades. I would not be surprised at all to see a change in the future, which would update the garment, but I'm just not too sure about that. Any last thoughts on garments and the letter and everything that we saw this week?
Well, surprisingly, what you just said is different from what Jana Riess found. She found that actually the men are wearing their garments less than the women are. So we always hear in conference, the women, it seems like, are the ones being addressed, but she found out that actually men are wearing their garments less than the women are.
I wasn't familiar with that. And maybe that's just the fervency of men in the church might be less. It's hard to explain why that might be the situation.
Or they might be in situations more where you're in the military or in other group settings where you're in large groups that you wouldn't wear them out of ridicule or whatever. So that could be contributing to it. It's certainly surprising when you consider that they seem to focus on yoga pants and not on Levi's that men might wear.
Just this last graph here says daily LDS garment wearing by generation. The Next Mormon survey, boomers, 84%, Generation X, millennials, and Generation Z is definitely all in the 40% range. It seems like it's getting worse for the church rather than better, although this survey, I don't think really tracked it over time because we don't have good data, to my knowledge, that goes back. Jana Riess also, she brought us that article, and she also brought us this article here from the Salt Lake Tribune, where she talks about the positives and the negatives in LDS church growth. There's something for everyone to cheer or boo in the most recent data. And she always brings us the best sociological takes as far as church numbers are concerned. I know you read this article here, Landon. What is your overall takeaway to what Jana Riess is saying about the latest in LDS church growth?
I think people interpret it the way they want to interpret it. If you want it to be positive, it's positive. If you want it to be negative, you can find a negative in either one of those. The church is saying it's growing. I think the last number is 252,000 in the last year that the church grew. How many of those are active, how many are not, has been a difficult thing to track. And so I think you can determine whatever you want from these numbers.
I mean, she gave us LDS church growth since 2010. Let me bring up this slide here for you, which talks about total membership, which is on the left-hand side. And the church in 2010 was around 14 million members, and it has steadily and persistently increased at a rate of approximately 1.5%, give or take, until 2023. It seems to not be on an exponential growth. It seems to be a pretty consistent growth track on the left-hand side there, where the membership was reported by the church in the last General Conference at 17.2 million members. Global membership in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has surpassed that 17 million mark, boosted by the past 3 years in a post-pandemic rebound in convert baptism. So what we see in that middle section there is convert baptisms that have generally been in that 200,000 range pretty consistently, except for, of course, it dipped in 2019, 2020 as far as COVID is concerned. And it took a while for those missionaries to get back into the field in order for those numbers to rebound all the way back to where they were before. But we're seeing that it's back basically to the levels that it were. What's your takeaway there from those first two, either the church growth on the left or the convert baptisms?
One thing that isn't shown here is the number of missionaries that they have, and they claim that they have like 10,000 more missionaries than they've had in the past, and yet the numbers don't show the growth that you would think would be representative of 10% growth. With 10,000 more missionaries, you'd expect there'd be much higher growth, and you're not seeing that in the numbers.
I would say that one reason for that is that peak in the missionaries, or I would say the return to the way that it was before, that was trotted out by the church about 6 months ago, saying that we're almost back to the levels that we were. It takes a while for those missionaries to get processed through the MTC and for the baptisms to track through and for them to get reported into the church numbers. So it might be a little bit of a delay. I don't think it's necessarily a sign that the church missionary program is either less successful or more successful. That's just my humble take on it. Let me show you this last slide here as well here. The children of record. Now, this to me, Landon, is the most important takeaway out of this entire article. And look at the children of record here. We have seen a consistent decline in the children of record. And for those who don't know, Landon, what do we mean by children of record? What is that?
That'd be children baptized when they're 8 years old, born into the church.
Right. Now, so we see children of record going down, and we obviously see it bottom out in the COVID timeframe where people were not meeting physically. But we have not seen the rebound in the children of record like we've seen in the convert baptisms, which is basically back to where it is. Now, what can explain the lack of children of record and how that has been persistently declining over the years, as pointed out by Jana Riess?
To me, that would point out that the membership is leaving, or they're not insisting their children be baptized at the rate that they were before. If I were to interpret these numbers, just not looking at them, not knowing anything else, I would say that the convert growth is happening in third world countries such as Africa and maybe South America, but that their mainstay of members in the Morador or in the United States and in Western Europe is not growing.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at this one more time, the total membership on the left here, the 1.9% average year by year growth rate in the church is barely keeping up with the world's global population, which I believe is increasing at around a rate of about 1.5%. And in the last couple of years, the church is not making progress as far as getting ahead of the global growth rate in the church because it's been less than that 1.5% figure. So the stone has been cut out of the mountain without hands here, but it is not rolling forth to fill the whole earth. In fact, the earth is gaining more ground as the stone goes down, and it will never reach the bottom at this particular rate. It's not going to smash all nations. It is not going to fill the world unless we see something drastically different. And with the secularization of the United States and of European countries and of the entire world in particular, I really doubt that we're going to see anything change as far as positive church growth is concerned.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's going to take a big change. And I'm actually surprised the number of growth in Africa, just based on some of the stories that I've heard of people coming back from Africa, because the marriage rates are very low over there. And, some of the requirements to join the church, when you have a culture that doesn't marry, or there's a lot of Muslims in Africa, so they may have multiple wives, which you think would limit the number of people they could be baptizing over there. So Africa's a little bit of a strange animal to be to see how converts are coming from there right now.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk a little bit more about the church in Africa as we go through the rest of this podcast. I do want to discuss a couple of other things on this. The children of record. We saw from the young adult devotional 2 years ago with President Oaks and his wife, where he discussed and lamented that Latter-day Saints are getting married much older than they used to be. 10 or 15 years ago, the average Latter-day Saint was getting married at age 22. That has creeped up persistently, and as memory serves, it's somewhere around 28 now, which is almost tracking with the U.S. national average. He also bemoaned that Latter-day Saints weren't having as many children as they once did. It used to be that, Latter-day Saint families were larger and they were averaging, I believe it was around 3.5 children per Latter-day Saint family, which was quite high in the United States. Now it is almost tracked down to the United States average. And that is what is affecting this children of record, is the fact that people are getting married later and they're having less children, and the fervency level of Latter-day Saints is dropping as well. Those three factors in my mind spell a troubling prediction for people who want to see the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And before I just give you the last take on this, remember with David Bednar in the National Press Club briefing back in, I believe it was April of 2022, where he was asked about church growth rate, and he lamented the fact that the church is not achieving a replacement rate as far as replacing the population, which directly goes to the children of record. That basically says that the only reason that the church is maintaining or increasing in growth rate is because of the inertia of the previous high children of record that the church had. But as that declines, we will eventually see this pyramid inverted. In the last general conference, we saw that in the church's numbers report regarding its membership, that there was a number of anomalies, especially considering the people leaving the church. It seems like the disaffiliation rate has really been as far as the church numbers are concerned, the church has deflated the disaffiliation rate, which according to a couple of surveys is quite high, maybe even 36%, and has also made it so that the people who are staying on the rolls, they're staying on the rolls far past what they should. So we're seeing a lot of different things as far as church growth rate is concerned here.
Yeah, I have kids in the childbearing ages right now, and I can tell you right now, it's the economy is definitely affecting these kids. They can't afford houses. They both have to work full time. They're exhausted, so they're having one or two kids, just like the rest of the United States has done for years prior to it. Those people living in the Morador area here, they can't afford that anymore, and both couples are working, and that really hurts their ability to raise children and have multiple these big families that they used to have. Or it could just be that they're not wearing their garments, and that's not helping.
I don't know if you're going to be able to put those two things together or not. But let me give you the sum up here from Jana Riess. I think this is a very good takeaway to summarize this entire article and get your last thoughts on this. She says there's something for everyone in the recent data about the Latter-day Saint membership. Fans of church growth will be delighted with the church's steady as she goes report of marginal growth, especially in an era when other religions are in outright decline. But people who want to see the church's demise, which she calls narrative one, will point to the long-term trends of diminishment in the new children of record and the fact that although the overall number of wards or congregations and stakes or clusters of congregations is stable, there are more members in each ward now and fewer wards in each stake, which are likely signs of reduced church activity. There's also the larger issue of people leaving religion in record numbers in many parts of the world, an overall trend that is hard for a small minority religion to resist. It's not going to be impossible, but it's going to be very challenging. That seems like a pretty good sum up of this entire article, Landon.
Like I say, I think you can see just about anything you want into it or read anything into it. If the church would just be transparent with their numbers so that we knew exactly how many were actually attending, that would really clear up all of this. That's the frustrating part to me is they know the numbers, yet we have to take these polls and try to interpret data from the numbers that we're getting when the church really already knows what these numbers are.
If the church had good numbers, I'm confident that the church would report the numbers. The fact that it was taken out of General Conference a while ago, that shows to me that there is a troubling underbelly or undercurrent of disassociation, disaffiliation, and the rise of secularism that is affecting the church in profound ways. Now, Lana, we talked about how the church was doing well in Africa as far as the number of converts is concerned. And this also came across my desk here, and this is kind of unusual here, and it shows the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints meeting houses in a number of different places, including Africa here. They're hosting thousands of Muslims for Ramadan, which I think just barely concluded here, the Muslim holy month of fasting. Look at these pictures here of Muslims worshiping at a Latter-day Saint meeting house and breaking the fast at the evening time frame here. What do you think about that?
I've never seen the church do anything that they're not directly getting a benefit out of, and that seems to be what they're trying to do here. I know they tried, many of the churches in Utah Valley opened up their churches for the homeless people to come to during the cold weather, but the church opted out of that program. Instead said they'd provide food or something like that, but they would not open up their facilities. So that makes you question, why would they open them up for Muslim prayer and Muslim Ramadan, other than that they're trying to put on a good face in Africa to try to encourage people to leave their faith as Muslims and become LDS.
Yeah, I guarantee that Joseph Smith and Brigham Young are rolling in their graves looking at these particular photos because they would never do something like that, at least in my mind. And here's a couple of other photos that came along with this as well. Again, a lot of folks here in African countries, in the Sudan, and in majority Muslim African countries. There's quite a few of them, Sierra Leone, I believe, and a few others. In fact, Africa as a total continent is actually about 40% Muslim. And we know that the church is doing relatively well in Africa. In other words, a lot of the converts for the church are coming from the dark continent, and they want to continue to have access to that big convert pool. And I've seen this happen a number of times in the Mormon News Roundup, where the church seems to be rolling out the red carpet for Muslims in Africa. And I believe is an effort to try to open up some of the other countries in which the church does not currently have access to especially majority Muslim countries, and to show African nations that, hey, well, we respect your rights, we respect your religion, so be sure to let our Mormon missionaries proselytize in your mostly Muslim country.
They are the masters of diplomacy at the church. I can say that as we've been studying, that's one thing we found. They will take leaders' children and they'll give them scholarships to BYU for free. And then those leaders then go back into those nations and open doors for them. They do this kind of thing to get in. It almost seems like the Mormon church is doing everything they can to run away from Mormonism and everything they can to run towards Christianity and the Muslim faith. It just befuddles anyone who grew up in the church where we were told so much to stay away from those other religions and that we were the only true church. And now we see them running towards those same religions that they used to say were the great and abominable churches.
Now, transitioning to a couple of our last articles here, we have the Chad Daybell trial here, the Doomsday Mom, and also, first of all, Lori Vallow has already been sentenced and she's already serving time in Arizona. Now, they're just starting up here a couple of days ago, the Chad Daybell trial, which you can watch daily here, Landon. This is really going global. You can see here, just scrolling through YouTube. In some ways, this is far and away the biggest article this particular week as far as Mormon news is concerned. A lot of people out there are into true crime and they're watching this Chad Daybell and also his attorney as we're calling witnesses, and they call it the Doomsday Cult Prophet Murder Trial. People are really into this stuff, aren't they?
It is. It's big, and true crime is huge, especially in the post-Mormon world. In fact, a lot of never Mormons are really fascinated by by all of this drama that we're seeing in the post-Mormon world.
Okay, let me cue up the best clip that I have to give the summarization of what's happening on, I believe this is day 6 or 7 of the Chad Daybell trial, and let's get your reaction to what's going on with the Doomsday Cult Prophet.
Chad and Lori Daybell's financial and travel details were highlighted in court today. Of course, Chad Daybell's trial is underway in Idaho. A detective took the stand today, saying 3 days after Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow got married on a beach in Hawaii, Chad sent an email to a realtor asking about a property on the islands for a clean couple with no kids or pets. At the time, Vallow's children, Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow, have been missing for nearly 2 months. Tylee received benefits after the death of her father, Joseph Ryan, while Lori and JJ received benefits after the death of Charles Vallow. The Rexburg detective became emotional today when he testified about the last time young Tylee used her bank card.
And you see here on the 8th, that's the last proof of life we have for Tylee. We have nothing in our investigation has shown that she is living after this date. And then after, for the month of October, Lori's receiving Tylee's benefits directly into her personal account. Last known sighting of Tylee Ryan, I believe, was a photograph where she was in Yellowstone on the 8th of September, 2019.
And so these purchases that were made after that date, what was significant about those to you in this investigation?
Just complete opposite of anything that Tylee was doing up until this point. Everything is done online in this account.
Now, the detective walked through a number of accounts, including bank accounts, loans, and credit cards. A lot of information to unpack here.
Landon, I haven't been following this trial as well as I should have. And I realize now from watching that clip why I haven't. It's just because this is incredibly hard to watch. These are Latter-day Saints who were in the temple just a couple of weeks before they committed this alleged incredible atrocities. We know that Lori has already been convicted, and the evidence is absolutely overwhelming for Chad. Honestly, I'm getting emotional watching this. To think about the monstrous actions of these individuals is just completely reprehensible.
Yeah, I'm with you. I have not been following it. It's for exactly this reason. You watch that and it's just heartbreaking to see what they did with those children. We actually took a trip up to the Rexburg area, and when we were up there, we went past the Daybell residence. There were wreaths hanging from the fence line and signs in support of the children. And you could see where they had dug up the children's bodies there on Chad's property, and it's just heartbreaking. It's wretched, and it's scary to see that people would even behave that way. So I'm with you. I've really had a hard time watching this or even following it at this point.
I know that we're supposed to cover it on the Mormon News Roundup because it is the biggest Mormon story of the week. And maybe it's going to be one of the biggest stories of the year. I don't know, because it has received a huge amount of national attention, not just, KSL and East Idaho News, but it's being picked up by CNN and others. This is a multi-week long trial. And it's just incredibly hard for me to watch because it's sad to me to see what religion can do to people. Once you start believing in fantastical narratives that are completely divorced from reality, it opens you up to believing almost anything and committing incredible atrocities. I've got to do a better job covering it, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to do so. And I guess I'm just going to have to live with that. Any last thoughts on Chad Daybell here, Landon?
We're seeing this over and over in the church, and yet we're not seeing the church take any stand to stop this. Wear your garments is not the answer to stop this madness that we see permeating through the church.
Yeah, we didn't see in the last General Conference a denunciation of people who believe in these incredibly harmful mentalities and who prop up Tom Harrison and Visions of Glory. We didn't hear anything about Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrand. We didn't hear anything about the Thibodeaus or the Daybells or the Vallows or any of these people that are causing significant carnage on our planet. Instead, we continue to hammer home a message about garments, and we've seen in the survey results that few people wear them anyway, and I sincerely doubt that these letters will do anything to change anyone's mind. If you can leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, you can find the Mormonish podcast there, and you can also find the Mormon News Roundup. We'd be very grateful for that. Leave us a comment in the comment section. Do you want us to cover the Chad Daybell trial better than we are now? I want to hear your feedback, and we'll tailor our content to whatever it is that you're looking for. Landon, our final article here is something that is totally different here, and this has really gone crazy here. And this is that ex-Mormon TikTok sensation, Alyssa Grenfeld, who was interviewed by the New York Post, or at least covered here just a couple of days ago. And she makes this somewhat bizarre claim here, Landon, where she says, I'm an ex-Mormon, and here's why members of my former church look alike. An ex-Mormon turned YouTuber is sharing why so many members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints look alike. Landon, do Mormons look alike?
Well, I think that's a pretty big stretch to say everybody, a generalization that everybody looks alike. I think there is definitely a Mormon look that we're taught by the brethren, what clothes we're going to wear, that we're not going to have tattoos, we're not going to have piercings, we're not going to have nose rings, we're not going to color our hair, have wild haircuts, you're not going to be able to grow your hair over your ears. There's definitely a Mormon look that you can help identify people. But to say that everybody looks the same, I think is a bit of a stretch for me.
Let's take a look at Alyssa herself, where she responded to this particular article, and she explains her thoughts, because this has garnered a wide reaction both on X, on TikTok, YouTube. It's really going all over the place. Let's hear what she has to say.
A few days ago, the New York Post wrote an article covering one of my videos about why some people look Mormon. They summarized my video while offering up some additional supporting evidence. Yesterday, the Mormon Church's news organization, Deseret News, did post an article responding to the New York Post. Curiously enough, though, they chose to completely remove my name from the article, and anytime there's a direct quote from me, they attribute it to the Post. Popular Mormon YouTube channel known as Word Radio also did an entire episode just based on my content, and somehow managed to never use my full name in the entire 45-minute long episode. Funny we can have so much conversation about my content without ever referring faithful viewers to my name or my channel directly. It's almost like they're worried that by mentioning my name, they may help people find my content. And it's entirely unclear what might be so worrisome about that.
Okay, Landon, how come the Deseret News, who responded to this kind of bizarre article in the New York Post, that's kind of unusual. They don't normally respond to these type of things. How come that they and Word Radio refuse to say the name of the person who they're talking about? That's kind of weird.
Oh, I think Alyssa hit it on the head there. They don't want anyone going to her channel and seeing the content that she's producing.
Okay, let's get a couple of other Twitter reactions here. And this is from Dr. Manhatava. Why do you guys give this bigot so much attention? And that's what you're seeing from a lot of faithful members here, Landon, is that they're saying that that is a bigoted take. In other words, you're painting all Latter-day Saints with an incredibly broad brush by saying that they all look alike. And they pointed out, some folks pointed out that if you replace the word Mormon with Jews, that I doubt that the New York Post would cover that. If you said all Jews look alike, or I don't know, all African Americans look alike, I think it's unlikely that the New York Post would pick up that particular article, though I could be wrong. Is Alyssa Grenfell stereotyping and engaging in bigotry?
I don't know if I would say she's engaged in bigotry. I think she's just pointing out that Mormons do have a look to them. When I was growing up, it was kind of a badge of honor. People would say, "Oh, you can always tell the Mormons wherever you go," and I agreed with that. If they're temple attending Mormons that go every week, I can usually, in most locations, I can pick out and I can say, "I think that person's Mormon." And obviously, from the garments they wear, if they have that garment line, you can easily pick them out. I think there's some truth in what she says. I just think it's a big stretch to say that they all look alike, but there's definitely a Mormon look.
There's actually a research study on this that back in 2015 that said that non-Mormons can identify Mormons 60% of the time, and Mormons themselves are even better at slightly being able to identify other Mormons. So it seems like there is a grounding in reality in this, of saying that it is possible to make educated guesses. It's not a slam dunk. It's not 100%, but it seems like there definitely is some signs that help people understand who a Mormon is and who a Mormon is not. This is another reaction from McKay Coppins, who actually wrote the recent biography on Mitt Romney, who said, "It's close, but I think my favorite part of this article is where it says the Latter-day Saint Church website offers beauty tutorials, and to support the claim, links to a 23-year-old fictional story published in a church magazine about the importance of inner beauty." Now, I do want to respond to that, because the church does give beauty advice, and it still does today, and it does it through the strength of the youth pamphlet. That is literally beauty advice as far as what your look is supposed to be, as far as how many piercings you're supposed to have. Now, I know that it has been revised here in the last about a year as far as taking out the prohibitions against piercings and against tattoos. But for many years, it talked about a particular look that you were supposed to have, especially the original for the Strength of the Youth, which was back in 1965, that talked about whether girls are supposed to put on makeup, whether they're supposed to wear grubbies, supposed to have curlers in their hair. The church has always been concerned with the aesthetics of especially the young women in the church.
Yeah, we on Mormonish actually have a episode coming out where we have gone over the history of the Strength of Youth pamphlet since about the 1950s. And it's amazing to see the different styles and what they tell you. And you're exactly right. They do tell you what kind of bathing suit you should wear, the length of your clothes, the length of your sleeves. The garment itself dictates what kind of clothing you're allowed to wear and how that clothing is to be shown on your body. So they clearly dictate what the standards of beauty should be for the young men to look at, as well as what the young women should aspire to and dress to.
I got a couple of Twitter reactions here. Here is that famous park in Salt Lake City. What's the name of that park? Giles Park? Is that the one with Joseph Smith in it?
I've been to it many times. I can't remember the name of the park, but it's a fun little park.
Yeah, so they say, well, despite not being pioneer stock, I'm still easily identifiable as a Mormon because I look like a huge friggin' nerd. You would definitely think that he is a Mormon, wouldn't you? There,
I'm guessing he might be. Is that a mission T-shirt that he's wearing?
Could be. And how about this? Here's another take or response to Alyssa here. She says, "Here's why my white multi-generational members of my former church look alike." And I do want to kind of respond to this. First of all, when the Saints really came across the plains in the late 1840s, early 1850s, you had a smaller population. You would have a lot of people who were close family members. And so the population was smaller. So yes, there could be more of a look, I think, in the 1850s than there is today, because a lot of the people who joined the church, first of all, the missionaries who went out and converted people in the late 1840s in places like Liverpool, England, and Scandinavia, and some other places in the 1850s, they were all white. The church didn't really baptize black people altogether, and they didn't start sending people to even Polynesian islands or Latin America for a long period of time. So it inculcated a really white-centric European look in the 1850s. And because, Utah was kind of separated and, away from the rest of the United States before the train came in the 1869, I believe. Yeah, it was much more insular. So I think that the argument that Alyssa is making here, it would be much more appropriate to say in the 1860s. The problem is that the church is a much more pluralistic organization now. We removed the race and the priesthood ban in 1978, and we sent missionaries all over the world now. So it's a little bit, shall I say, myopic to say that the gene pool thing is still affecting the church, because if you look at the Latter-day Saint membership across the world, it's pretty diverse in some places.
It's definitely become much more diverse, and it's spread out, especially with the lifting of interracial marriage. When I was younger, that was pretty much forbidden. Now you see a lot of couples that are mixing interracial, and that produces offspring that has a completely different look from what you typically would define as the standard Mormon white European look. So it's definitely diversifying over time. To say that that they're inbred at this point is I think is not factual by any means.
The use of the term inbred here, I think, is a poor choice of words. I'm just going to put it that way. And let's hear from Alyssa as well here. And she answers the question, why do some people, quote, look Mormon? Let's get her thoughts on this and get your reaction to it.
Have you ever wondered why certain people look Mormon? I see this all over social media where certain content creators get tons of comments saying you look very Mormon. Mormons really only marry other Mormons. You can't marry in a Mormon temple unless it's two Mormons getting married. This, in large part, has made it so that the gene pool is actually very small, and especially in a place like Utah, where Mormons fled and went to Utah to be able to practice polygamy in peace. Those Mormons were only making babies with other Mormons for a very long time, and the only opportunity to make the gene pool a little larger is to convert people. I think another reason for this is not just the way Mormons look, but it's also the Mormon vibe, which is often super hyper friendly, almost too friendly. Mormons are taught to proselytize and share their religion. People think that Mormon culture is very copycat. Mormons believe that there is something called the straight and narrow path, which gives you a very strict outline for how you're supposed to live your life. And while that might not have anything to do with a Stanley Cup, it does create the sense that there is one right way to do things.
So first of all, Landon, is there a Mormon look? Is there a Mormon vibe? And number two, is the population or the gene pool of the church really small because Mormons usually marry other Mormons?
Yeah, I disagree with the inbreeding, but the rest of what she said, I pretty much do agree with. There is a Mormon look. There is a Mormon vibe. In fact, the Mormons themselves will tell you that. If you leave the church, they'll say, oh, your countenance is not the same. They'll actually tell you that you changed your look just because you left the church. So she is right. There is an overly friendly vibe to Mormons, especially if they know that you're not a member and they think you have a potential to be. There definitely is a look of the way that you dress, the way you speak. I think she's right on some of that, just not on the interbreeding.
I do take issue with the term inbred. I think that gives a wrong connotation. I don't think there's a reason to go down that. So I was actually in the Word Radio show where they were actually talking about this, and they asked me, do you disavow what she said about inbreeding? And I would say yes, as a general rule of thumb. Look, I'm just going to put it this way. I'm not on Alyssa Grenfield's team. I'm not here to prop her up. I think that the use of the term inbred is a poor choice of words. And I think that she could have accomplished what she wanted to say about the church's pressures to have a conformity in look without using the term inbred. That's just how I'm going to say it. But what about this, Landon? Is this guy Mormon? What do you think?
I'm going to guess yes.
So complete stranger looking at me. Oh, yeah, he's Mormon. Other stranger. Well, you can't tell that just by looking at someone. And actually, Landon, I think from now on, I'm going to put this Donald Trump, a little picture of him in all of my slideshows. It's kind of like a Where's Waldo from now on.
Yeah, I think we called that the angel trumpeter.
Donald Trumpet. I'm going to throw some right wing to the MAGA followers out there and put one of those in every single one, just to make sure that no one can accuse me of going woke. But here is that particular program here, Real LDS Ladies Debunking the Daily Mail's false claims about, quote, Mormon face. The master of the clickbait, the Cardin Ellison, those Word Radio guys, they know how to get the clicks. There's no doubt about that. I queued up one clip in there, Landon, that I know that you haven't seen. Let's get your reaction to their basic claim about whether Mormon face is a real thing or not.
I feel especially those who are privileged enough to faith have an extra sparkle. I'm sorry. You just appear to be happier. And you appear to love your family and your kids and your spouse. And you also appear to be very happy to be at church every Sunday.
Okay, Landon, is there such thing as Mormon face? And are people in the church actually happier? And you can tell that by looking at them.
I would say there's definitely Mormon face, but that's because the church has taught you that you must always appear to be happy. I think we see the same thing in a lot of cults where they tell you, oh, you've got to look like you're happy from being here. So they're always encouraging you to look happy because that reflects on the religion themselves. I don't know many women or families who would tell you on a Sunday morning when they're getting ready that they're happy and they're smiling as they get ready for church. But boy, the second they walk in that front door, there's sure a big smile on their face as they see the friends and neighbors.
Well, Landon, all I can say is I was always happiest when I came home from church, took
Yes.
off the tie, kicked off the shoes, and enjoyed the rest of my day. Maybe that's why I'm here right now. But, look, I call this the happiness wars. It's Mormons and ex-Mormons who frequently engage in it. And they say, well, I'm happier because I left the church. And then Mormons say, no, I'm happier because I'm in the church. And especially church members themselves will say, you can't find true joy outside the church. That's why we can tell that people who are still in the church, they have a special glow. They have a special look. Their countenance is white and delightsome, whereas ex-Mormons are dark. They're cringy. You can see the light that's gone out of their eyes. This is a very common sentiment here. And I want to say it's a trope, but it's actually not a trope because we've heard it spoken over the pulpit, even in general conference, even from Brad Wilcox very recently, who talked about people who left from TikTok. So seems to be a phenomenon that is not going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah, I think they seem to want to tell everyone that you can't be happy if you leave the church. And that's a message we see over and over again. Look, happiness is a state of mind. It's an individual point of view. Sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're not. It can go up and down. It ebbs and flows. It has nothing to do with your faith. It has nothing to do with whether you're going to church or not. It really has to do with how things are going in your life and how you look at life and how you approach life. And you can change that. You can leave the church and be happy. You can stay in the church and be happy.
Yeah, and I see people, especially with David Archuleta's recent exit from the church and affiliation with the ex-Mormon community for the first time in the last couple of weeks, who continue to say, well, he was happy when he was in the church. Look at those pictures of him singing with the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. And now that he's an ex-Mormon, you can see that he's not wearing his garments, and you can see that he is living a life of sin. And they say the same thing about Alyssa Grenfell, and they're saying, now she's dark. Now she's angry. Why are they so angry? And they say, well, when I go to church, when I commune with my people, I see happiness. I see joy. I see people who want to live the gospel. That brings happiness to me, and it brings happiness to the people who are in the church. Whereas people outside of the church, they can't find that same level of happiness. This really all goes back to the Mormons having an exterior expression of looking like they're happy, when we know that there is also some incongruous data that undercuts that. For the fact that Utah, for instance, leads the nation in a number of harmful factors, including the number of prescription medications for mental illness, including a higher than national average suicide rate, including a number of other very disturbing metrics as well. So it's a shiny exterior, but sometimes when you get down below, there's more of a sinister undercurrent. Any last thoughts here, Landon, on Alyssa Grenfell, inbreeding, Mormon face, or any of this entire fiasco that we saw from this week?
Well, I think what they're saying, based on what you were just saying, is I'm happiest when I'm surrounded by people who agree with me, and that makes me happy and everybody else happy. I will admit that I have definitely lost the smile since I left the church, and that's the smile that went right here in my garment line.
Now, what is the tagline of the Mormonish podcast again?
Living a happy life on the other side of Mormonism.
Wait, I thought it was
living a joyful life on the other side.
I know your tagline better than you do.
Yeah, I know.
Very nice. Now, for the Mormon News Roundup poll of the week here, we're going to just do something a little bit different here, Landon. Haven't tried this before, but we're going to queue up a few pictures here as far as seeing whether you are better than the average bear, because we saw that the study said that non-Mormons can tell Mormons at a decent clip, not perfect, and Mormons are pretty good at it too. So I've queued up 10 folks in here, and I need you to take the Mormon News Roundup poll of the week with me and tell me, are they a Mormon? Are they not a Mormon, or are they an ex-Mormon? So you got 3 choices here. Are you ready for this, Landon?
Okay, I'm ready. This can be fun.
We release new episodes of the Mormon News Roundup every Sunday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Landon, when do you release new episodes of the Mormonish podcast, by the way?
Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and then also on Friday mornings at 11 a.m. Mountain Time.
Fantastic. Great. So we're going to run you through the poll here, and let's see if you really do know your stuff and are a Mormonish podcasting legend like you claim to be.
Oh,
Okay,
no,
so
that's Rebecca. So we need her.
no. You don't need her, Landon. You got this. You got this, Landon. You can do this. I've got confidence. I have faith in you. This is the same individual with two different pictures. I'm going to give you multiple pictures just so you can get the full aura here. Mormon, not Mormon, ex-Mormon. Let's see how you do.
Wow, that one's tough. I'll go with Mormon.
Jacinda Ardern, she was a Mormon during this picture. You know, the Prime Minister of New Zealand.
Oh.
Now she's an ex-Mormon. This is her back when she was a Mormon. So this was a tough one because she's an ex-Mormon now, actually one of the most famous ex-Mormons in the world. But at this time, she was drinking the Kool-Aid. How about example number 2?
Is this the same person? She's definitely got a different hairstyle in the
Same
two things. Okay, I'm going to go with not Mormon. She's not showing any signs that she couldn't be a Mormon. So
this is Sister Tracy Browning of the primary presidency. She's a general officer of the church,
okay.
Landon.
Okay.
This is the most powerful Black Mormon leader in the church. How about here?
Oh, he's an ex-Mormon.
Very nice. Paul Walker. I should have given you a bonus point there for if you could name the names here. So yeah, actually we need Mormon, ex-Mormon, or not a Mormon. And if you can name it, that's a bonus point. Okay, we're 2 out of 3. Yeah, he was in the Fast and the Furious series, right?
Yeah. Great series.
Yeah, unfortunately he passed away a couple of years. Yeah, passed away a couple
car
of years
accident.
ago. But luckily, Landon, we don't have to do his temple work. So that's handy.
Well,
let's move right along here. How about number 4?
I'm going to say not a Mormon.
This is Aaron Eckhart. He's an ex-Mormon. He used to
Okay.
appear in Mormon. I run the Mormon movie reviews every Monday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. He's actually appeared in 1 or 2 LDS movies. He served a full-time mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He left the church a short time later, but he played in the Batman series and other things. He's now an ex-Mormon. So what are we at here? What's our total right now?
I'm 50-50 right now.
Okay, we're 2 for 4. That's okay. That's pretty good. The average there that we're looking for is somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 to 70%. And then let's see how we're doing. Okay, how about number 5?
I would say not a Mormon.
Ex-Mormon. Roseanne Barr.
Is that Roseanne Barr?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I didn't recognize her.
She was raised LDS. Actually, I grew up in Salt Lake City, Landon, in a downtown in the Sugar House area. And that's also where she grew up as well. She was a little bit before my time. She went to East High School, which is where I would have gone if I stayed in that area. My brother went to East High School, but yes, she was a big time Mormon until around the time of high school. But yep, she's an ex-Mormon. So we're 3 for 5. Okay, that's fine. Here we go. Number 6.
Let's go with Mormon.
Sebastian Stewart Johnson, one of the Black Menaces here.
I thought he looked familiar. Yeah.
Nice. Yes. I believe that he's in his senior year at BYU. I'm not 100% sure about that, but he's very popular on the Black Menaces, goes around, does the interviews on BYU campuses, asks people a number of controversial questions, gets a lot of interesting reactions. But yes, he's a member of the church. Okay, 3 for 6, not too shabby. I tried to clickbait you here by putting one of the clips under here. I'm going to make $75,000. I thought that would throw you off the trail, but you saw right through it.
That's a guarantee he's a Mormon if he's going after.
Okay. I see where you're going there. How about number 7?
She could be an ex-Mormon. That low-cut dress there, I'm going to say non-Mormon, but she could be an ex-Mormon.
But you can't cover your bases. You can't hedge your bets here. You got 3 choices, Landon.
Well, it's hard to tell because they leave, but I'm going to say non-Mormon.
This is Brie Larson, Captain Marvel, the Marvel movies. She is very famous. Not a Mormon at all. No way, shape, or form. It has nothing to do whatsoever with Mormonism. I'm trying to trick you, but it's not working here. That was good though. You got that one. I think, what are we at? We're still around 50%.
We're 50%.
Yeah. Still 50% here at number 9.
I'm going to say not Mormon.
This is Taylor Frankie Paul, the famous TikTok swinging sensation who was eventually arrested on child battery charges. A very eccentric individual, but she is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Wow.
Has not left the church here. She supposedly has a reality TV series show that's coming out on Hulu in a short period of time called Those Crazy Mormon Swingers. Yes, she is a member. Okay, so
she must be in that 60% that doesn't wear garments.
I can't speak to that for sure. Okay, we're getting there. We got 2 last ones to go with.
I'm going to say not Mormon.
Holly Jane is the Mormon mistress. She makes $40,000
this
a
is
month
okay.
on OnlyFans. Her entire tagline on OnlyFans is that she's a nude Mormon model. Unfortunately for her, she was attending church the entire time. Eventually, the Strengthening Church Members Committee gave a dossier to her bishop, and she was excommunicated unceremoniously just a few months ago. So she is currently an ex-Mormon. She says that she was shunned by her Mormon community. But yes, Holly Jane, she is an
I imagine
ex-Mormon.
so.
Indeed. Okay, and finally, our last example.
He played one on TV. So, but I'm going to say not Mormon.
Nice. Yes, I tried to trick you. He's under the banner of heaven. Andrew Garfield played in the Spider-Man movies. He's also played a number of religious figures, including he played Jeb Pyrie in Under the Banner of Heaven, that fictitious detective based on the John Krakauer book, which was released, I believe, in the early 1990s. But he is in no way, shape, or form a Mormon, even though he's played a number of religious leaders over the years. What was our total there, Landon? I'm sorry, I should have been keeping track.
I think I was 5 for 10. Yeah. Which is what you'd expect if you're just guessing, but
yeah, you got 50%, but I think that's not too shabby. I actually ran this poll through my son, and he actually got almost every single one of them wrong. I tried to make this as tricky as I possibly could. So I like to trick people. I'm kind of a bit of a troll here, but let's take us to our final segment, Landon. I really appreciate you coming on, and that's the Mormon News Roundup joke of the week. And I believe that you have that for us.
I do. How do we know that Moses is Mormon?
I don't know.
Because he entered the empty sea.
Oh my gosh. Okay, that's well, actually, we actually don't know that, Landon. If you want to be technical about it, we have almost no proof whatsoever that Moses was a real person, that he took the children of Israel. It's very, very sketchy, but I do understand the joke as far as that's concerned. So that's pretty good. Now, as far as the Mormonish podcast and as far as the Good Book Club, Landon, what projects are you working on, and how can people get in touch with you?
You can always tune in at Mormonish Podcast. We are on YouTube. We also you can listen to us on most podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcasts at. We just released this morning an episode on Does Size Matter? It's about the steeples on the temple. It appears the church is now making the argument that tall steeples is a part of our faith, and we go over why they might be saying that and where that's coming from. So that's just came out about a couple hours ago. It's a fun episode, so encourage everyone to tune in and listen to that and comment back.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. As far as the things that I'm working on, we have the Mormon Movie Reviews, which premieres every Monday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you come over to YouTube at that time, you can interact with your humble host, and we're reviewing that old classic that was released in 1980 called A Cup of Coffee. Now, this was a film strip that the church released around that time, which talks about the evils of coffee, Landon. And here you see Lucifer himself grinding his own bean. This is a crazy movie that you definitely don't want to miss.
They don't call it the Devil's Brew for nothing, that's for sure.
Now, I want to thank you, Landon, so much for coming on the Mormon News Roundup. I appreciate you ruminating with me on the great and spacious beehive. And I want to give a shout out to Weird Alma on bandcamp.com for this episode's music. And remember,
no unhallowed hand can stop this podcast from progressing.
When it comes to nicknames of the church, such as LDS Church, the Mormon Church, to remove the Lord's name from the Lord's church is a major victory for Satan.
Satan.
That's the tagline.
Oh.
No unhallowed hand.
No. You better tell me the whole thing again.
That's
no
fine.
Unhallowed hand can keep the...
No unhallowed hand can stop this podcast from progressing.
No unhallowed hand can keep this podcast from progressing.
Stop this podcast. One more time.
Stop this podcast?
No unhallowed hand can stop this podcast from progressing.
Oh.